Shalom, Otis. Welcome you once again to another class.
Shalom, Otis.
Hey, tonight we're going to approach the topic of heaven and hell. Those are a couple of how can I put it? Some of the the most misunderstood scriptures and topics of the Bible. The concept of heaven. The concept of heaven and hell also, okay? So what we're going to do, we're going to open up with an understanding on the use of the word heaven in the Bible. Just like in the one topic we had to deal with the term world. We had to deal with the fact that it could be used in many instances, to convey different messages. What is the same with the word heaven? When you read the Bible, the word heaven, for the most part, has three uses, okay? And we're going to go through those uses first, scripturally. And then we're going to go and show you the heaven that Christ was speaking of was a total different heaven than the other two types of uses. So when you read the scriptures, we'll begin with Genesis chapter 1. And the very first use of the word heaven is found in the book of Genesis chapter 1. And what it describes is a covering of the creation that would eventually be called earth. At this stage that we're getting ready to read, the earth hadn't even been created. The earth was, but it wasn't in its form that it would, in other words, it wasn't in its finished or final form after the creation was done. It was in a stage of elements. Okay, it was in its elemental stage. It was in its stage of components, but it hadn't been put together yet. So when you read Genesis chapter 1, one of the creations, as a matter of fact, the Most High, let's read it. The Most High made two things. The one thing that was created before the heaven was literally the light. So we're going to, what verse is that it talks about the...
Verse 4.
Is verse 4?
Verses 3 to 5, actually.
Which one? Is what?
And we're talking about light and darkness.
So this is what we'll do. And then when does it start talking about the heaven?
And verse 6.
Okay, so let's read Genesis chapter 1, verses 1 through 6. Yeah. And then, your voice way up in your mind. Okay, go ahead.
Genesis chapter 1, verses 1 through 6. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth was without form.
Now, we're giving you this topic of heaven. So, this is not a breakdown of Genesis chapter 1. That will come later. And when that comes, we're going to have to show you exactly really what's being said in this verse. Because when it says God, it isn't saying, quote, this one entity. When you read the Hebrew, it lets you know there was a team of multiple forces working on this thing that would be called the creation. So, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. Go ahead.
Verse 2. And the earth was without form.
Now listen to that. That's the whole point. It doesn't say that the earth wasn't. It says that the earth was without form. In other words, it was, but it wasn't in its final form. It hadn't taken on the form that it would once the creation could be considered a finished product, a finished work. Go ahead.
And void.
And void.
And darkness was upon the face of the deep.
When it says the face of the deep, it's literally talking about what we call space. In other words, the Most High, it was nothing but darkness. Go ahead.
And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters.
When it said the Spirit of God, the Spirit of the Most High, the Spirit of these powers, moved upon the face of the waters. When it says the waters, it's literally talking about the portion of elements that the Most High was getting ready to start working with. That's what he's speaking of. The face of the waters. There's a certain, like we would say, a canvas. That portion of canvas where I'm going to begin to make this picture or I'm going to begin to paint this portrait, that's the surface of it. So out of all the vastness of this thing that we call space, or that the scriptures refer to as the deep, the Most High chose a specific portion of it and he began to move on it. He began to work with it. That's why he said moved upon the waters. Go ahead.
And God said, let there be light, and there was light.
So listen, shows you the first thing that was created was light, proving that all light does not come. The sun is not, quote, the source or the only source of light, or the primary source even of light of the universe. The first thing that the Most High created was light. Go ahead.
Verse 4. And God saw the light, that it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And the evening and the morning were the first day.
Go ahead.
Verse 6. And God said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters.
Now, when he said in the midst of the waters, which waters are you talking about? The water or the elemental composition, H2O, had not even been created. In other words, that type of water hadn't even been created. So when he said, the Lord said, let us do what?
And let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters.
When he said a firmament in the midst of the waters, those very same elements that he began to move on, he began to separate them. So when he said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, he's really saying, let there be a barrier in the midst of all of this space. Now what he was doing is he was taking the elements that were outside of the realm that he was beginning to work on, and he was separating them from those elements on the inside that he was going to physically be changing and reconfiguring into this thing that we know to be earth. Go ahead.
And let it divide the waters from the waters.
So what was the purpose of it again? Read it again.
Yeah. Verse 6. Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters.
Now when it says in the midst of the waters, in other words, you got all these elements and the Most High is doing something with it. Go ahead.
And let it divide the waters from the waters.
And I'll show you, it was a barrier. The purpose of this firmament was to divide the waters from the waters. Now he's going to tell you a little bit more detail. Go ahead.
Verse 7. And God made the firmament and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament.
Showing you, it's talking about elements, the things that we call atoms, and protons, and neutrons, and electrons. In other words, the Most High took this substance called a firmament, and he said he wanted to divide the elements that were above the firmament from the elements that were below the firmament. So what we know now, because of the creation that we're in, he's talking about the group or the area of space that was on the outside. He was separated from that which was to be under or within this firmament. This firmament today we know as what the scientists call the ozone layer. It's the protective layer that covers, that engulfs the earth and its atmosphere to protect it from the elements on the outside of the earth and its atmosphere. Okay? He calls it the ozone layer, and it's an invisible barrier. It's that you can't see it, but Esau knows it's there, and he knows that it actually is used to protect us from the gamma rays and various types of ultraviolet rays that come from space. Not just the sun, but space's atmosphere is full of different types of gamma rays. That's one of the many types of rays that they call it. You know, gamma rays and ultraviolet rays. Go ahead.
Verse 8.
Read verse 7 again.
Verse 7. And God made the firmament and divided the waters which were under the firmament.
So he divided the elements on the outside of this atmospheric barrier. Go ahead.
From the waters which were above the firmament.
Okay, so he took the elements that were within it and created a barrier from those that were to be on the outside of what we would eventually begin to call our atmosphere. Go ahead.
Verse 8. And God called the firmament.
And called that barrier. He called the firmament. He called that barrier what?
Heaven.
Go ahead.
And the evening and the morning were the second day.
Now that's one use of the word heaven in the scriptures. Now when you read the Bible, you're going to read certain verses, and those verses literally are going to be talking about, quote, space, the heavens. It's going to be talking about literally the different levels of the atmosphere and above and beyond it. And it will say heaven.